Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. And today we have, of course, Michelle.
Hello.
And the wonderful Gwendolyn Womack with her book, The Fortune Teller.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Michelle and I are so excited.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we had a major freak out moment, fangirl moment when we found out that we were going to get to read the book and then that you agreed to come onto the show with us. It is late.
Thanks for having me.
And we have a slightly unconventional evening. I just got back from North Carolina with the kids, and that 1 hour time difference is like, it seems like nothing, but it's huge. And so my kids went to sleep, took a nap at like 4, and like 5 o'clock, I was like, okay, they need to wake up now. And they didn't. And it got later and later, and it switched from please wake up to please stay asleep.
Right.
And at like 9:15, they woke up. So I'm actually not drinking wine. I'm drinking coffee tonight because I have a feeling I'm going to be up a lot later after the end of this.
And so, Gwen, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Coppola Claret, which I like. So I thought I would go with red tonight.
I did too, and I like Coppola. That's a good brand. Tonight, I decided to try something different. With Stellar Organics from South Africa, because it has this really cool mandala on the front.
Oh, cool.
It kind of fit with the theme, and it's like fair trade and organic and like all the other good stuff.
So you feel less guilty drinking the whole bottle.
I do, but I'm not so sure how I like it. That's a problem.
The taste is a little not.
Yeah, it's spicy for Shiraz. So it's not a spice that I'm used to. So that's going to be pretty crappy if I get this like good conscience, really good earth-friendly wine and I don't like it.
So I'm just going to drink vicariously through you guys. I did check to see if we had Bailey's, and we don't. Or Kahlua. We have nothing. We have coffee.
You're killing me, Smalls.
I know. Sorry. So I apologize in advance if any chaos erupts on my end. We have cars going in the other room, so hopefully that will keep them occupied.
Yes.
And that's her super cheesy laugh.
Yeah, somebody's in a giggly mood tonight.
And it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I probably didn't help that one out with making faces at her beforehand, so I'm sorry. Kind of. So before we get into things, I just want to warn people, we will be having spoilers, so if you have not read the book, proceed at your own caution.
Yes, spoiler alert.
Yes, all over the place. And so to give people time to get used to things, I figured now would be a good time to announce our winners.
Oh,
yay!
We had 32 entries, which is really
like a big girl giveaway.
Yes. And it was, lots of great people entered, and we had the winner for the fortune teller was Ellen Pfister. Or did I say that right, Michelle?
You totally did. Ellen Pfister. It was a random. Diana handles the giveaway, so I don't even know how it works. But it was one of those random generator things. But Ellen happens to be my aunt, so I'm super excited that she won.
Yeah, it's through Rafflecopter, so I have absolutely no say in the picking. And then the winner for the memory painter is Jana Leia.
Yay!
I will be emailing them. If you guys are watching, you're going to be getting an email from me soon with all of the so I can get your information. And so let's ready to dive into questions, because I know Michelle has a million of them, like normal. You can tell who the journalism major is between the two of us. She comes up with all these questions, and I'm like, I can't fit anything more in. You've got them all covered.
Well, I think one of the first things that I thought of when I started reading the book is that there are so many areas or so many topics that you can like really obsess over. And I thought her field in paleography and her knowledge of handwriting analysis was so interesting, because I remember going to like the Orange County Fair when I was in high school, and they had those, it was like, you know, you pay $1 and they insert your handwriting into this machine and they tell you all these things about you. So I just thought the handwriting analysis portion of it was so interesting. And how long did it take you to research all of this?
The handwriting part, I've actually always been fascinated with handwriting analysis too. And it was something when I was growing up, I actually studied, got books and read about it. I was really fascinated with it. And when I was working on Simile's background, and I really wanted her to be a manuscripts appraiser because she needed to find this thing and be able to translate it and know what to do with it. So I kind of had to work backwards and really build her world and her career. And I did a lot of research just on, conservation, preservation. And I became a member of the Manuscript Society, which I discovered them in my research. And this is a society of collectors in the United States, well, really around the world, but it's based in the U.S. And I was so excited to find out they existed and become a member and start getting all of their, newsletters and stuff. And I just remember it kind of coming out of that, the whole paleography, just coming out of that research, and it felt right that was her passion. That was kind of like her into that whole world. It started with handwriting analysis and then went into, analyzing ancient handwriting. So it was kind of, I don't know, it just kind of fell into place as I was researching her in her world. So,
that's interesting that you said that you basically had to work backwards, because you kind of do, like, you can almost look at the book and look at it in reverse and trace, like the manuscript and Semele all the way back to Ioana. And are we pronouncing that right? We looked it up on Google one night.
Well, I say Iona. I mean, that's just
Ioana. Okay.
Yes, after having to learn how to pronounce Semele, it was like, okay, let's get this one right. And I love the names. They're also interesting and different.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I spent a lot of time finding the names that just feel right to me. And so for Iona, I knew Iona's world and Semele's world, and then it was just really charting how they were going to meet and how, the kind of myth of Tarot was going to meet the real history of Tarot. And, I knew there were certain places in history and time that I wanted the story to land on. It was kind of like a connect the dots. And it really came from actually libraries and researching. It started with, the Library of Alexandria. And then I just knew I wanted like touchstones to be kind of the great libraries of the ancient world that would kind of be this flow of, knowledge going from one place to another to the other. And the cards in the memoir followed that kind of river. So that was really, how I got from one place to the other and connected Iona and Semele. So.
Very cool. So like, I've always wondered, like, with the books like that, for your technique, do you for the plots, do you interweave your outline together for the plot? Do you just free for all it, or do you do like a side by side for their plots?
I do both. It's really a 50-50. I kind of have some really like the basic broad strokes really mapped out. And for the fortune teller, I started it actually not knowing who my antagonist was. I knew the World War II story. I knew that somehow it was all connected there, but I didn't have him. I didn't have that character yet. And so that was a bit of a leap of faith for me to kind of start writing, because I felt I had enough to just start, and I wanted to start. And so, you know, when I started writing, and then those text messages just came out of nowhere, and yeah, and I wrote them. I wrote them not knowing who they were from, and I was like, "Ooh, who's this?" You know. And then, you know, by a certain point when I was in the first draft, I was like, "Okay, you know, enough's enough. You know, I've got to, you know, get to this character," and I did. It all worked out, but it was really interesting. So that was a first for me to kind of write. Where I didn't know, and I'm glad I did it, you know, in hindsight, because it gave me surprises along the way too. So,
and he's a great villain. He's very like a classic, almost like James Bond style villain.
Yeah,
and you don't even know, like, you don't know who he is until the last few chapters. But in those few chapters, you just hate him.
Yeah.
Like, he's crazy. But so those text messages, since you brought them up, Diana and I have different theories on who they are. Like, we can both agree that one of them is Victor. Diana, who did you think the other? I think the other one was, I think the other sender of the text messages, hold on a second, Lily, was Raina. That's who I think the other one was.
Raina's one of them, but Mikhail, I think, is the other one. I think there was between two people.
Okay.
For when I wrote it, it's all Raina and Victor. It's between the two of them.
Okay.
Yeah. That's interesting. You thought Mikhail was involved in the text messages. That's cool.
Yeah, and it was funny because like he was my first thought, and then he would do something, and I was like, oh, well, there goes him. That's not him. Maybe it's Cabe. Nope, can't be Cabe. Okay, all right. And it's like it went down. I was like, okay, it's got to be Raina. And then it took me about a half an hour after I finished the book to figure out that it was Victor who was the other person.
Yeah. And I think at first you start reading the text message, or at least I started reading the text messages in a, like, they're looking out for her. Like, they're monitoring her, but they're on her side. They're just kind of like keeping tabs on where she is with the manuscript. And it isn't until maybe like halfway through that you realize, like, oh no, these are not good people.
Right.
Whoever they are. So even the text messages, you had really didn't know where it was going to take you through the book.
Right.
It really created that suspense that there's something bigger, there's something behind the shadows here.
And the super creepy part, the part that freaked both of us out, and we text each other when each of us got it to the part separately, was when she was sitting in the library reading, and Iona said, "Look up, someone's watching you." It's like, no, don't be that girl. Don't be creepy.
Yeah, that really just came out of the writing. I mean, I had a lot of fun writing this book. So it was that wasn't planned. So it was just little things like that where just I just kind of let the story kind of take its course, and I really liked that Iona saw that clearly, that she knew exactly when Simile was going to be reading it, and it was just a lot of fun to play with that. That here we have someone talking to somebody 2,000 years ago, and that was when I first started. The original idea for this story was that I wanted this character to inherit her grandmother's cards and not understand the kind of inherent abilities that she had. And then when I was really kind of really starting out with the idea, when you're writing a book, history is just this open canvas, and you can go anywhere in time. I was like, I could really set this anywhere. I could go anywhere. And then as I was researching tarot and card history, and I really wanted to take that that tarot myth on its origin story, and really start it from there, that's when I realized that the ultimate grandmother was Iona, you know, writing to her granddaughter, so to speak, through the generations. And so that was kind of like a eureka moment for me, where, you know, it was like I took, you know, this idea of the generation and just I expanded it. So.
Well, it was really interesting, and I thought, I mean, you have like two things tying them together through the generations. You have the manuscript, and then you have the tarot cards that are actually passed down.
Right.
But was it when you find out that the tarot cards were painted with her with paint using her blood, that was just kind of like an extra tie? Did you add that in later, or was that kind of always the intention to have that actual physical connection within the card?
Yeah, I wanted that physical connection from the beginning, because I just felt that Simile needed it in order to have that complete link. And I the DNA and the genetics testing, that was from the very beginning. You know, wanting that to be a part of the story where you know, Simile was going to be able to know without a doubt that she was connected with this you know, seer. So yeah.
And you know, I feel like the Library of Alexandria has kind of exploded back onto the literary scene. I mean, maybe it's always been there, I'm just noticing it more, but I feel like it's a really hot topic for historical fiction books to talk about it. But I love how you incorporated so much of the history on it, because before this book, I've never really wanted to even research about it that much.
Thanks. Yeah, I enjoyed researching it. It was a big reason why I think I was attracted to the whole origin myth of tarot, which the French started in the 1700s, and you know, historians have debunked. And but yet, I still wanted to go there. I still wanted to do a what if these symbols originated there, and kind of have fun with it, while at the same time, you know, I was very conscious of wanting to stay true to card history. You know, once we get to that point in Rinaldo's story, that's kind of where real card history takes over. Kind of the myth passes the torch to what we know. And but a lot of the attraction was, I was fascinated with the Library of Alexandria, and it was really interesting to research it, you know, and make that a starting point. So.
And were there any other historical figures that were included in the story? I know I'm totally blanking on his name right now, but the Frenchman who Aisha met when she was playing harp for in the parlor.
Yeah, I'm going to say his name wrong. I wrote it down because I always mess up the real names.
You're back.
Antoine Court de Gébelin. And I'm probably saying that wrong, but yeah, he's and that is you know, he was the one that really wrote about it and got everybody excited, and he had this whole idea that they were, you know, ancient Egyptian lost symbols of antiquity, and so I just thought, you know, I wanted to write the scene in the room, and that is he was looking at them playing the card game, and he did kind of have this eureka moment, and I thought, well, what if Iona's descendants in that room playing music, you know? And so that was the moment that, you know, it kind of, you know, took over. So
I read that scene going, he feels important. Like I wonder if he was real, because he kind of feels like he would be real. Yeah,
he was real. Yeah. And that was fun. You know, it's really fun when I try and just put as much reality and, you know, historical facts into the fiction, because that just makes it more interesting for me. So yeah.
And it makes everything more plausible too. I mean, you've got this real person who's in the story and people who are real, so that you can attach to them. Mm-hmm. And while you're reading the book, you feel like, okay, this stuff can actually be happening. This could actually happen to someone.
Mm-hmm. That would be nice. I would love to find an ancient hidden manuscript in some Swiss guy's collection of antiquities and find out that I'm descendant of an ancient seer.
Some hot Swiss guys. Let's specify that here.
Yeah, that wouldn't hurt.
Well, speaking of Theo, now Michelle, did Theo warm on you by the end of the book? Because I know you weren't fully really feeling him.
You know, Diana and I have differing tastes for lead males. She likes the Theos of the world, and I do too. Mm-hmm. But I like my character. I mean, there's nothing not to like about Theo. I just like my lead characters to be like more protective. So I was kind of like, who is this guy who mm-hmm. like kisses her and then disappears and is all aloof on the cell phone? But no, I liked him at the end. I didn't dislike him.
Yeah, you know, it was tricky because, you know, Theo and Simile's story is not the thrust of the book. You know, it's really Simile and Iona. And, you know, everything that's happening with Simile is making her kind of wake up and really look at her life and realize that she hasn't been true to her intuition. She knew it wasn't going to last with Bryn. And, you know, and I was really just playing a lot with the idea that, you know, a lot of women have this intuition and yet they don't listen to it until later, you know, and it's like they always knew. And and I kind of wanted to write a character like that, where this was you know, everything that was happening to her was kind of this catalyst to just reevaluate and you know, realize that you know, he wasn't the one for her. And you know, Theo really, I mean, he's in another country. He's trying to let her figure things out. And so, you know, he came into the story when it was time for him to come in, you know. So I think if he was there throughout, it would have been a little bit more of a kind of a drama, you know, love triangle, which really wasn't what I was trying to do. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved his character. I loved how he kept his distance because then it made it more about Simile's journey as opposed to Simile plus Theo. And so, yeah, I was curious if that was just like, it was a purposeful thing. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, that does add a bit of a, you know, feminism thing to it, I think. I would think Theo would be a feminist in that regard because he doesn't feel like he needs to ride in and save the day.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, you see, he is an extremely romantic guy, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, just he's been waiting to meet her. He's translated this thing. He's read it God knows how many times. And, you know, he was watching her the whole time. She's there at the chateau and she didn't even know it, you know. So it was a lot of fun to kind of reveal all that as it, you know, she had no idea, and it made me like Theo more as I was writing him too. So it was fun.
I love the way you describe the characters, like with building the characters. So yeah, I started to like him more. Wasn't sure at first, but yeah, no, I like him. They grew on me. It's like they have a life of their own.
One character that was super easy to not like was Raina. You just didn't like her. She was just, you know, not a nice person. But I love that at the end you gave her that connection to Victor, obviously, and then to Simile, and it kind of gave her not an excuse for what she was doing, but I felt a little sorry for her at the end because it was like she probably grew up and spent her entire life knowing that she disappointed her father just because she didn't have this power.
Right.
It was all just like her trying to make up for it. So yeah. I hated her a little bit less at the end.
I loved her. She made a great villain. I loved to hate her. She was like that perfect frenemy, that bitchy girl from high school. Oh, sorry, Michelle. She was like that cheerleader that she always had to compete with, and I love that about her.
Yeah, I mean, for Farina, it was, you know, it was just a fine line of how much how much time do I really spend with her, and you know, because I didn't want to give things away too, you know, so it was tricky. But yeah, she's very flawed. She's very tragic. And everything that you said about that dynamic with her dad, and you know, and ultimately when I wrote her, she didn't really understand why she was there. You know, she was sent on this assignment, and you know, Victor's doing this big grand experiment, and all she's doing is trying to follow his direction, but yet, you know, and she's getting into this relationship and all this stuff's happening and it doesn't go the way she wants. And yeah, it's really, it's, you know, she is a tragic character, but yeah, definitely a villainess at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so since I had to cut out and come back in, I'll let you take over further questions, Michelle, because I'm not exactly sure where you're at.
Well, we handled that technical glitch like pros, let me tell you.
Right.
But so, you know, my first question was kind of about there's so many different things to focus on and that you had to research and then you mentioned that the Library of Alexandria is really kind of what drove you as far as research. Where did you get the idea for this? There are a lot of balls in the air for the story.
Right. Well, for me, I actually was really introduced to tarot at a really young age. And I went on this trip to France with a group of girls when I was in 7th grade for 5 weeks in the summer, and with our French teacher. And her grandfather, she was from Paris, and her grandfather was a Rom, a gypsy, and he had taught her how to read palms and cards and faces. And so she kind of grew up with this, you know, heritage and way of looking at the world. And so by the end of this trip, she read my cards by candlelight, and it was this really, you know, amazing experience. I was in 7th grade, and you know, in France, and oh my gosh. And so later, it made an impression. Obviously, you know, I've written this book, but so later in high school, I started going to psychic fairs and getting my cards read. I was really fascinated with tarot, and I got a book and some how-to books, and I got a deck, and I became friends with a tarot reader, and she taught me how she read her cards. And so that was kind of like my education with them. And then later, when I was writing stories, this was after grad school, I was kind of trying to think of the stories I wanted to tell. And this one came up that I really wanted to tell a story that would travel through the major arcana of the tarot, where you would have a character and she would start with the Fool and she'd end with the World. Because I thought, well, what a great journey that would be if you traveled, your story arc was the major arcana. And so that was kind of the original idea I wrote down in my storybook, and then I left it, and that was literally 20 years ago. And then I was finishing up The Memory Painter. I was finishing writing it, and I was trying to think, you know, what my next book would be. And the fortune teller just kind of kept coming to the foreground, like, this is what I should write next. And it just felt right. I started envisioning like each chapter a card, and you know, and I started researching, thinking, well, this really maybe should be the next story, because I already was in Egypt in The Memory Painter, and I wanted to read about the Library of Alexandria. And the more I researched, it just started really coming together. And I didn't know a lot about card history and tarot history when I started, and kind of that history really informed the story and helped shape it. And on my website, I put a bibliography of like all the materials that really helped with the story, and I tried to break it down into sections, like tarot part, the science part, the lifetimes, and the conservation and restoration. My point was, I actually had a point. I was about to get to it. I just trailed off. It's the wine, which is why I don't drink wine when I give talks. This is a first, so only first.
This is why we have the wine. It's why we enjoy having the wine, because we love hearing these, going off on these tangents. We get so much interesting information out of it.
Now, I had a point about the bibliography. There's something there. Gosh. I'll remember.
And everybody should just go to the big bibliography and check it out.
There's a reason.
Yeah, there you go. And the wine is a convenient scapegoat if something like that happens. Yeah. So
that's why we have it. We think of everything. And you brought up the memory painter, and I'm so glad you brought up the memory painter, because I love the memory painter.
Oh, thanks.
And from what I understand, there's going to be a second memory painter that I've heard. Is there any news on that?
Quite possibly. It's not what I'm writing right now. If there is going to be a continuation of that story, I really think it would be a standalone companion book that people would not have to have read Memory Painter to read this. And I do have something in mind. It's just not fully formed yet. So yeah, I'm not quite sure when that story will kind of come about. I tend to just go where, the inspiration strikes, really.
Understand that. Okay.
So since we're kind of just talking about writing in general, what is your writing process when you're working on something?
I don't really have a set anything. I mean, it changes. It depends on where I'm at. Like if I'm breaking a first draft, it's literally a lot of laying on the floor, staring at the ceiling, and trying to, really get it. Once the first draft is done, it's just everything's easier for me, because I love to rewrite. And I can rewrite forever and ever and be happy, because I love to do that. But yeah, so when I do that, I work on paper, and I take pages with me everywhere. So like, my son's in karate, I'm in the car doing the, I used to be sitting in the class, now he wants me in the car. So, he's more of a big boy. So I sit in the car with my pages. So I bring pages everywhere, my red pen and pages. And then I enter those in and print it back out. And that's the rewriting, and that's, but as far as a schedule, I just work whenever I can. And I tend to look at writing as not just sitting at your keyboard writing. It's also, you can be writing in your mind when you're taking a walk and when you're, doing anything. It's, you don't have to be sitting in a room alone in the quiet to write. So that's how, I'm pretty all over the place. So
that weird word, quiet, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I can't function when it's quiet. I always have to have something in the background, whether it's music or the television. I'm one of those. I have to have background noise.
Yeah, I like to pick music, instrumental, and I like to loop songs. So like I'll pick a song for a specific scene, and I'll just put it on repeat until I'm done writing it. That's when I'm actually, able to sit at my desk and have the door shut, and, and I do a lot of writing like that at night and during the day when I can, but yeah.
Oh man.
You got a little repeater. So I think we should spend a little bit of time talking about Cave, since Michelle was so fond of Cave.
Okay.
And Michelle had the question of why did Cave have to die?
Right.
I loved Cave. I was so sad when he died.
you know, he just did. It just happened. And I was like, I couldn't undo it. I don't know. It felt wrong to try. And, you know, ultimately, you know, this was Victor's experiment. He wanted dramatic results in a very short period of time, and he planned all that. And it just seemed, it was, you know, unfair and brutal. And in the story, Kay was a great character, but I just felt like I didn't really second guess it, and I didn't feel like, what's the word? I didn't agonize over it. It just was like, it happened, and it had to happen, and she was so affected by it, and you know, it was her lowest point, and it just, you know, that's kind of why that happened that way.
You feel better, Michelle?
Yes. Before you joined the hangout, we were talking about the text messages and how you kind of like laid breadcrumbs out for a lot of the things that would happen. And one of the things that kind of came to me before you mentioned it in the story was the dream she had about the bike accident, and she thought it was just like a memory from her childhood, when actually it was a premonition of what would happen to Cabe.
Mm-hmm.
And when I thought that, I was like, oh, no, because I thought about that before you found out that he wasn't going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh man, he's going to die.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
All right.
Bad things happen to good people, Michelle.
It's a thriller. It's a thriller.
Yeah, exactly. It's a thriller. You like this genre, Michelle. You should be used to this kind of stuff.
I know, but you know what? When I get upset about a character's dying, that just means that I'm really connected to the book. So it's a good thing. If I was like, whatever, then something is wrong.
Right.
Well, sorry, repositioning here.
Well, it was one of those things where this is one of the first book in a long time where I've actually had physical like reactions to the story. I mean, at one point when Iona says Simile's name, and you know, or the look up, that one, I swear to God, I was in my office by myself. I jumped, got a little creeped out, had to look around like, okay, all right, nobody's here. Okay, I'm good. It was a very never-ending story kind of moment for me.
That's great.
With Cabe, I after his passing, I let off a string of curse words. So I may be playing the tough girl card with Cabe, but it wasn't so tough after his death. Yes, and I don't want to repeat those curse words because I don't think Michelle wants Lily saying them either.
No, she's going through a thing right now where she knows the words that are bad, and she'll go, Mommy, why did they say that word? Like, I don't know. They were being silly. But I really liked how you worked in the experimentation during World War II, and I started researching that a little bit, and I actually found a video from Russian scientists and is it Psi, like the Psi stuff, or is it, how do you pronounce it? The PSI studies.
I mean, I say Psi.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I found a video of a Russian housewife who was said to be telekinetic, and she could move things, and it was like from the Cold War era. So it's interesting to see that it carried over from World War II through, you know, the Cold War, that they were studying that.
Yeah. No, it was interesting researching it all. You know, yeah, and I just relied on just a lot of books and, you know, some documentaries and stuff, so.
So was Ivanov based on one specific person, or was he a compilation of?
Compilation, yeah. There wasn't one specific researcher that caught my eye and I modeled him after. It was more just, you know, kind of, yeah, an amalgamation of that, yeah.
Diana, you had a question about Victor and Evanoff, right?
Yeah, I was curious about it. I was actually just about to ask it too. So I'm glad we're on the same wavelength here. You don't get into much detail about who Victor is in comparison to Nettie and Simile. Was there a reason for that, out of curiosity, or was it just something that you wanted to have for the big reveal?
Yeah, it felt like that was a bombshell that needed to be revealed at that moment in the orphanage, the end scene. I just felt like if we had known any sooner, it just would have kind of given too much for us to know, you know, what's going on and who's manipulating Simile and all this. So it just felt right as a, you know, as kind of the big reveal that we find out.
And I could see that with Nettie's character, because it seemed like with Nettie, in her storyline, she was very guarded. And, you know, not really want to give away too many emotions and spill the beans on things.
Well, I mean, there was 3 years there in that prison with the experimentation, and we don't know what all went on. You know, there's hints of it, and you know, I kind of went around just to kind of skim the top shadows of it. I didn't want to go heavy into the details, and if I did, I would have had to have included that, you know, or else it would have been why, you know, even a bigger question, why didn't you? So it just kind of, again, I really don't question myself when something feels really right. It just feels really right. And I just kind of go, you know, I don't, you know, that felt like that was the time when we plus everybody in the room finds out this big secret. So, you know.
And that totally works. I mean, yeah, I'm not.
No, yeah, I mean, but I mean, it's just like, yeah, that's just that was the impulse of it, you know. So,
yes, you got to stay true to the story, and you did a fabulous job with staying true to the story. I mean, as I had said before, I actually like the fortune teller better than the memory painter, and I really like the memory painter.
Thanks.
So, you know, there's no complaining on my end. So Michelle, did you have any more questions? Because I think we kind of covered them all. This hour's gone by fast.
I know. Well, one last question that I had was, and I know we've kind of talked about this already, but I'm always really interested in how authors build their worlds. That's especially in historical fiction. You have to be, you know, you have to pay really close attention to building the world around you, especially when you're going back to Alexandria and through, you know, through the ages up until Simile. So how do you kind of, did you like focus like, okay, we're gonna, you know, right now we're talking about Iona, so I'm gonna research like crazy for Alexandria and build that world and then move on and stop and do the next one?
Yeah, if I were to try to do it all at once, I think I would really burn out. It was really intensive, all the research, to where at one point I was fantasizing about just writing a contemporary story next with absolutely zero historical research, because I was like, what did I get myself into? With, you know, I would literally leave one world, one time period, and then I have to start the research all over again for the new one. And I did do it that way. I compartmentalized, which is really what I did for the memory painter too, with those lifetimes, because, you know, it's like I can only, you know, it was just focusing at one time in history. But yeah, it was looking back, it was hard doing all of that. You know, you have to start all over again with a new time and get, you know, read as much as you can about it before you want to, you know, you feel like you can write it. And yeah, so.
Yeah. My books are going to stay within one time period because I'm having a hard enough time.
I will write one soon that's just one time period, and I am looking forward to that. You know, just one historical time period where I can stay put. It actually sounds really lovely. I think I might do it. So, yeah.
Well, my editor, when it comes to the world building, my editor has been getting on my case about bringing in more of the outside world and really creating that feeling. And You did that a lot, especially with, you know, with Iona, and you could picture the Alexandria, and you could picture, I mean, the library there, and also where she goes when she meets, I forget her husband's name.
Who, Iona?
Yes, and you can picture everything there. Any tips or things that you use to try to really pull that through?
Tips, I would say I try and show the world through action and the characters' eyes and their thoughts and feelings. So if you're just kind of describing it, it starts to feel a little bit, I call it book report mode, and you just kind of want to stay out of that and keep it in character mode. So, you know, if you can really put those little embellishments in through their eyes, their experience, and their, you know, what they're actually doing, make it be a physical action, it tends to help it. You know, I don't like to spend a lot of time on too much detail. I'm a very impatient reader, and probably an impatient writer as well. So I just, you know, try, and a little goes a long way, you know, it really does. So yeah, that would be my tip, is just stick with the character, with their emotional journey, and then weave the history and everything that they're experiencing, you know, through them. Make them be the channel for the history, you know, for that time period, you know. So yeah.
Okay, so well, I think that's all of my questions. Anything else for you, Michelle?
I am just curious if you can tell us what you're working on right now. Maybe a little bit, not entirely.
Always nosy.
Yeah, I am working on something, and I'm hoping to really talk about it after the holidays. It is going to be another thriller and a love story that is going to be very much in the same wheelhouse as both the memory painter and the fortune teller. And it will travel to different places in history, but in a whole different way. It's not going to do it in the way that either of the other two books did. So I'm really excited for it, and I just need to get through this, getting the story completely down, and then then I'll be kind of talking about it a lot.
So you'll have to come back next time when the next book is out so we can talk about that one.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. It'll take me a little while, but yeah, I'd love to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can even come back in between, you know, if you need to talk about the book. Get some, run something by us, you know. Oh, we never talked about casting, by the way. So,
yeah.
That's a big thing with us.
Is it?
We love our fantasy casting.
Cool.
I don't know if you kept up with any of our fantasy casting that we've done.
No, you cut out for a second. What?
I don't know if you've if you've kept up with any of our fantasy casting that we've done through the month.
No.
Okay, so a quick rundown. Simile was, I can't remember her name, but she was this. Did we pick somebody specifically, Michelle? I can't remember.
Oh my gosh, okay, so for Victor, we did Donald Sutherland.
Yes.
And Raina was Kenzie from Lost Girl, who is, if you're familiar with Lost Girl.
And I know I'm butchering the first name, so I apologize.
And we had
Simile was Evangeline Lilly.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. She could pull off Simile's haircut, so that's why she got the role.
Great idea.
And Theo he's still Charles Brandon for me. Superman.
And now I'm blanking on his name too. Yeah, Superman, Charles Brandon. Okay, go on, I'll think of it.
And Bran was Orlando Bloom.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah, and you put it, our girl Simile's got game, so.
Henry Cable.
Yes, that's it.
Oh yeah, it's a great look. I mean, he kind of has that persona, of Theo.
Yeah.
And I feel like you could really rock a turtleneck, and that's really what I picture Theo in. But he will always be Charles Brandon from The Tudors for me, so I will never remember his name.
Yeah.
So whenever The Fortune Teller is ready to be made in a movie, you already have the cast lineup.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just tell the producers to, you know, get with you guys.
Absolutely.
That's perfect.
Yeah. I mean, on Twitter, I already gave Deborah Harkness our seal of approval for her initial casting announcements for the All Souls trilogy, so we're good to go.
Yeah, no, that's exciting to see that one come to life. I'm excited to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then that she's writing another book about in the All Souls world. I'm super excited about that.
Yeah.
So that just means I have to go back and reread all 3 books because I really don't remember them that well.
Oh,
it's been a while, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think our hour is up. I am amazed that my kids were well behaved.
Oh, great.
So really thankful for that. And thank you for putting up with them on there.
Oh, no, it's lovely. Thank you for having me, really.
Absolutely. We were so excited. We've been looking forward to this book for a while now.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
well, it was really great. It was really great to be here. You guys are awesome. And thank you so much. And to everybody watching, thank you.
Definitely. And next month we're starting our September book. I can't believe it's September already.
I know.
We're doing the Book of Speculation by Erica Swiler, and it's all the way over in my bookshelf. Otherwise, I would show you. So everyone get started on that one now.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.